एनिवर्सरी के लिए द एंटायर कपूर फैमिली हैड फ्लोन इन एंड प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से मिलने गए थे उनको न्योता देने के लिए। तो उस आमंत्रण के जो वीडियो वायरल हुआ था उसके अंदर कई लोगों ने ट्वीट किया था कि परिवार वैसे तो हेल्म और टॉप ऑफ द गेम इन बॉलीवुड और फिल्म इंडस्ट्री, बट दे कैन नॉट फ्रेम 2 sentences properly in Hindi। तो हिंदी से शर्म है।
इंग्लिश का ऑब्सेशन है बिकॉज आवर माइंड्स आर कॉलोनाइज्ड। बहुत शुद्ध हिंदी में बात करोगे तो फिर आपको एक पर्सपेक्टिव देते हैं। ऐसा है एन एब्सेंस ऑफ गुड स्टोरीज, नॉट बिकॉज देर इज अ जनरल एब्सेंस ऑफ गुड स्टोरीज, बट गुड स्टोरीज आर नॉट बीइंग पिक्ड अप इन मेन स्ट्रीम and suddenly people are feeling that and that is also because writers are not being compensated.
Namaskar, Ram Ram. Welcome to another episode. With me is Miss Puneet Sikka. Puneet ji, welcome to the show. Puneet Sikka is a media professional who has previously worked as a writer in the news and advertising industry. She's also an aspiring actress with performances in theatre, TV and digital commercials. I'll have to read it pura. Short films as well as feature film to her name. Puneet studied at the Lady Shri College, Delhi and Symbiosis Institute of Media and Communication, Pune. Her debut novel, Take Number 2020, is a hybrid of pop culture and realism that combines her lived experience within the entertainment industry and her passion for writing. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, God's grace. How was the traffic on your way here?
Well, actually, for a change, there wasn't any. So
really?
Yes.
Abhi kal parso samay, so
we picked the right day to do the podcast.
you flew on the right day.
Yes.
You were traveling, na? Japan.
I just zipped.
You were in Japan.
Yes, I was. We were just there for a little family holiday and बहुत ताज़ी हवा अपने lungs में fill करके आए वापस।
Bags भी भर के आए उसके।
Bags इतने नहीं भरे, lungs भर के आया बहुत ज़्यादा। So
how was it?
It is actually not. It's cold there. It is, and it is, but it does not feel that once you're indoor, it doesn't feel that much. यहाँ थोड़ी ठंड ज़्यादा लगती है क्योंकि यहाँ पे the way the heating process is ना rooms में थोड़ा सा वो होता है कि अंदर भी कंबल वंबल लेकर बैठना पड़ता है। वहाँ थोड़ा the moment we are feeling cold, we used to walk around on the streets and everything and एक जगह से दूसरी जगह जा रहे हैं। जैसे ही ठंड लगती थी कहीं कैफे में घुस जाते थे just for a few minutes to regulate our body temperature because it used to be warm indoors. So yes.
But how was it culturally? What did you feel about Japan?
The thing I felt about Japan, funny we were talking about Japan, but what I felt, it's my first trip to some place, to a country in the Far East, in the East, out, further ahead of India. And I felt that they are so rooted and so steeped in their tradition, in their culture, in their language, that they have everything. They have the most modern of technologies. They have the most, they are at par with the West or perhaps even better as far as living a good lifestyle is concerned. But it is not, it's unlike the West, they are not a decadent society. They're not taking for granted what they have. They are hard workers, they are humble people, they're very disciplined. And that is something which without us having, all of us, we went as a family, without having to do much, we were automatically feeling productive. Even on a holiday, we were waking up early morning and the day starts early. There is a certain structure, which we went for a very short period of time, but just a few days, like a week, 10 days. But I think that in that much time itself, we felt very inspired with how they sort of, and also in the hospitality, it's very close to the way India is in that sense. Very hospitable, very warm. If we are lost, we don't understand, they would go out of their way until the time they do not, say, suppose we are asking for directions. A lot of them would just help out, go beyond, above and beyond to sort of help us find our train or, our destination in as much as they possibly can. So I think in that sense, it was very unlike how you travel as a tourist in the western part of the world. So yes.
And where are you? You're living in Gurgaon right now?
No, I'm living in Jasola.
So tell me, how was it from Jasola to Japan? You want to compare?
From Jasola to Japan. Oh, No, I mean, they're two different things, you know. Like, I've grown up in India, so you can't compare.
But come on, you have to give us something. It was Jasola से Japan आप गई. Culturally, did you feel any, how different was it? Or was it? You've shared how perhaps working style के अंदर there was a difference. But culturally, tell us a bit about your education, and then perhaps make a comparison. Where did you study? What have you done before we come to take number 2020?
Yeah, well, I grew up, my father was in the Indian Navy, so growing up was in Bombay, Vizag a little bit. And then we came to Delhi, so I studied here in Noida and schooling and in Amity. Then I did my graduation at Lady Shri College. And
How
so it was
long were you in Vizag?
I don't know, I think a year or so. I was very little at the time. So
So
I think
most
it
of
was
your
just
life you've been here?
most of
Around
my life
also?
I've been in Delhi. Yes, growing up I've been in Delhi and did my graduation here. For my masters I went to Pune.
What did you study in your
And,
bachelor's?
I did philosophy honors.
Very good.
We
LSR.
both philosophy in the conversation.
No, you began with it. You were making comparison with Japan. You perhaps started with that only.
I mean, but well, I think that is something which did help. You know, some things that you study maybe in your formative years, in your early years, it sort of sets the tone for how you look at life. And in that aspect, I came to appreciate how the Japanese are living and what they are experiencing. I did meet a few Indians also who've been living there for 2-3 decades, and so they were able to give me a good insight into the comparison between Japan and India. I will not be able to tell you. I just went as a tourist for a few days, and one is bound to, sort of, they say, when traveling makes you speechless at first, and then it makes you a storyteller. So at that point of time in my travel, during my travel, I was speechless. That, well, the beauty of it and all of that. But of course, every country, every culture has its positives and negatives, and so I'm not. Sort of going into only one aspect of it, but I think overall, when in today's world, a lot of us have traveled, have seen a little bit, and if not, then at least the internet is doing that for us. It's making us well traveled just by looking at what all is going on around the world. And so the people, the Indians I interacted with, especially who were living there, gave me that one common thread was that it's very similar to India in terms of how traditionally rooted they are, in terms of the concept of family, in terms of the concept of culture. So those aspects I think were very similar. And urban cities में हम थोड़ा भूल गए हैं क्योंकि वो है, हम काफ़ी affected हैं with the, we are very Americanized in the urban cities. अब जैसे आपने बोला आप दिल्ली में कहाँ रहती हैं, मैं साउथ दिल्ली बोलने वाली फिर उस पर एक नया जोक बन जाता है, but I mean the thing is that we're very Americanized, unfortunately, in my opinion, and we have forgotten what our roots are, what is our language, what is so many aspects. And I think one thing that I noticed about the Japanese, which I sort of felt, I wish we have that more. We have that in small towns. We have that in our villages, but not so much in our cities. That there is a sense of honesty. There is a sense of, saying what you mean, which is what overall I got a sense of when, as a tourist in that short period of time, and is what even the people told me who live there.
You said two things. So one, of course, was philosophy your first choice?
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
What?
it was my first choice. Actually, it was my first choice.
So interesting.
And the story about it is that I was applying, obviously, like we were applying to, one applies to so many colleges, right? And then you put the top three, your selection is the subjects you want. And around that time, I had met the head of department of the philosophy department in Indraprastha College.
Okay.
And I was applying there, and that teacher, that lady, she told me something very interesting. It kind of lodged itself in my head. She said, philosophy is in everything we do. And even the highest degree you see in the country is your PhD, Doctorate of Philosophy, then is MPhil, Masters of Philosophy. So she says there is philosophy even in those highest degrees. In India, and I'm talking like many years back, she said in India हम philosophy की कदर नहीं करते हैं as a subject, as an academic subject. But if you did study a subject like this outside, ह्यूमैनिटीज़ बेसिकली वही होता है ना, स्कूल में आपको या तो कॉमर्स चूज़ करो, कॉमर्स विद मैथ्स.
But isn't this also a consequence of rising Americanization? I mean, all our
Yes.
religion and all our faith, India में जिस धर्म की हम बात करते हैं, they were all philosophies. They were not
Yes.
structured religious schools, much like how we see Islam या और Christianity की एक किताब होगी
हाँ.
और ये तौर तरीके आपको फॉलो करने पड़ेंगे. इंडिया में तो अपने देश के अंदर तो हमेशा रिपीटेडली ये सब फिलोसफीज़ ही हैं और वो फिलोसफीज़ ही इवॉल्व करी और दोनों अलग अलग फिलोसफीज़ के अंदर एक डिबेट, एक चर्चा चलती रहती थी, जिस वजह से हमारी सभ्यता भी इवॉल्व की है. वुड यू एग्री?
एक्चुअली यस, द कॉन्सेप्ट जो आपने बोला रिलीजन और धर्म, एक व्यक्ति हैं राजीव मल्होत्रा जी, जो जिन्होंने आई थिंक मैं उनके काफ़ी वीडियोस पॉडकास्ट देखती हूँ, और जो लैंग्वेज के बारे में बोलते हैं दैट इट्स नॉट द इक्विवेलेंट. Religion is not dharma. It's separate. And the concept of religion has come from the monotheistic religions, that is Christianity and Islam, right? Which we have sort of adopted without understanding it. But हमारे यहाँ सनातन धर्म है, which is eternal, timeless dharma, which is a philosophy of life, which is understanding that there are no diktats, there is no sort of concept of, that if you do this, then you go to heaven, or if you don't do this and you go to hell, or whatever the equivalent of that, or whatever. We are not segregating that and sort of either dooming people to a certain, relegating them to a certain aspect, or sort of glorifying them and putting them in brackets. We are what our karma is. जो हम करते जाएंगे उसका फल हमको मिलता जाएगा, चाहे अच्छा हो या बुरा हो. And that is the philosophy. And a saint can become a sinner can become a saint.
We have many examples of it.
We have many examples. We have enough and more examples of it to understand it. But yes, religion, first of all, in my opinion, is not dharma. They are two separate concepts. And in India, भारत में जो हम believe करते हैं वो philosophy ही है. So anyway, point is that teacher told me something about, she explained it to a lay person in that way. कि हम materially कैसे देखते हैं, degrees के हिसाब से देखते हैं, तो ये है, MPhil है, PhD है, so and so forth. But somehow something in that conversation also came up, which sort of, maybe I was meant to do it, so I felt I gravitated towards that. So philosophy was my first subject. After that, in whichever colleges I applied to. So, and I was in fact, when I got selected in LSR and I went and in my class and amongst my batchmates, I found out that I'm the only person who's chosen philosophy as her first choice.
My goodness.
And everybody else, like, sort of, they
Political science, somebody else, and then
somebody had
second
chosen
choice.
English, somebody had chosen journalism. So everybody had different choices. But
How impactful was LSR in your journey?
very much, very much. I think especially growing up, one had this idea of we don't understand ourselves, especially as when you're going from a girl to a woman, and you're trying to understand. We're bombarded with a lot of notions that we have to sometimes unlearn. And going into LSR was that sort of what should I say? Boot camp is not the right word, but it was a sort of it opened up a world of possibilities in terms of how I see myself, how I view myself. What is my identity? What was my identity? What is the point of identity? I mean, everything. Again, this is philosophy also coming in the process, but having a voice and not being afraid to use that voice. That was where the seed, I think, was planted. And it takes time. It takes time to start to give that voice a power. And it came all the way. Funnily, this book, Take Number 2020, released in 2024, this year. And this was exactly 20 years back that I had joined college. And so I went to my, so the first copy of the book, in fact, I presented to the principal of Lady Shri as, having found my voice, sort of
So
being able to express it through this. And
tell me, so when you were at LSR, and you've chosen a very creative life for yourself, and we'll talk about your acting career, we'll talk about media space, we'll talk about writing. And since you had chosen a course in philosophy, would you recollect for us, as in, do you think that you were creative enough to perhaps take this road when you were in college?
I always wanted to I did not have to think about that, to be honest, because growing up also I was very inclined towards the arts. So I had trained a little bit in Bharatanatyam, classical music, and I was participating. I used to participate in a lot of activities in school also, music, dance, art, and then in college, in fact, I started exploring theatre,
Okay.
which sort of then became, also the basis of this book. So I was always inclined towards the creative arts, but in 2000, 2004, around that time, it was not media, creative arts was not seen as a mainstream profession. People still said that. I used to still get advice on like, "Aap teacher ban jao." Up I mean, mainstream, there's nothing wrong with that. Just that the idea was that, you know, your life would be sorted. You will get a certain sort of
How about your
structure.
parents? Were your parents wanting you to do something like that?
They were not they were not imposing in any way. They did have their opinions at the time, more in the sense that since I was doing philosophy, so they thought something which could be an extension of that.
Academia, probably.
Yes, academics, or but I had this in mind that I wanted to do media. I wanted to study films, and I had found out that, philosophy and films is a very good combination, which I had come to understand that, because you are putting your creative expression, and how do you put it, and how do you understand a dense subject as existence or God or whatever, or philosophies. How do you understand all of that, philosophies of the world? How do you understand that? And you talk about that through a creative medium, through a film, whether it's a fiction film or it is a documentary film. You are putting a certain creative element, a visual element to something, to a subject which could be dense perhaps. So I think in that sense, philosophy helped me think and understand, and lateral thinking was something which I cultivated while studying because of the subjects and topics. And so I think that really was that helped with film studies. So yes, it was something which my parents at that point of time were a little skeptical about my
Your father is also an author.
Yes, yes.
Tell us about him, and of course how he helped, perhaps, in some way taking, for you, for your career to take shape this way, because I mean, it's always the parents, na?
Yes.
Before you know it, you want to do a bunch of things just to ensure that your parents are proud, and your parents for that matter. I mean, your parents have no problem with your passion or art or what you want to do. They just don't want to see you poor or struggling with life. Tell us a bit about your father and your family, actually.
Well, my father was in the Indian Navy, and he is then he's with the corporate. He's working with a corporate now. So yes, I think writing was something which along his journey, along his working life, he came across some stories which he wanted to write and tell, and that. So funnily, interestingly, my mom is also she's also a writer. She writes poems.
She's the one who gave you a call, that I want to see you as an author someday.
Yes, and so in our family, we're all individually very sort of, we're doing our own thing. It's not very much that we're sitting and discussing things, or at least we did not. Growing up, we were all busy doing our own things. हम पढ़ाई में थे, busy थे, and writing a book or writing per se was not a discussion. Even growing up, it was not something, like I said, a part of a thinking that this will be mainstream, a mainstream profession. तो हाँ, उन्होंने जब book लिखी,
his book, I think it was his first book, which got pretty famous later on or something.
Yes, Calling Sehmat. So yes, and he wrote that, and I think after 8 years or something, then it was picked up by a different publisher. Like earlier, it was published by Konark, and then after almost 8-9 years, it was picked up by Penguin. So the thing is that it is, when you've told a story and you've put it on book or you put it on film, people usually in today's world will tell you it has a shelf life, but it does not. Stories never have a shelf life. You can tell that story. You must have seen, growing up also, if your grandparents or parents told you stories that story can be mishmashed and it could be told in end different number of ways, and it can also be told over and over again, and you can still not lose interest in that, which is why sometimes we go back to reading the same book. It's a comfort read, or we go back to watching a film time and time again because it's our comfort. We know what is going to happen, we know that story, we sometimes even know the dialogues, but we'll still watch it because sometimes that's the thing with stories, we sometimes want to be told that story time and time again. So that in that sense, yes, when he wrote that book, it kind of, what I learned from that process of watching him is that there is no need to be anxious with how when you've written a story कि अरे you know, जैसे पब्लिशिंग वर्ल्ड में भी मुझे पिछले कुछ महीनों में ही बोल रखा है कि आपकी तो अभी जून में ही रिलीज हुई है बुक, तो बहुत देर हो गई, अब तो बुक पुरानी हो गई। ऐसे बुक पुरानी कैसे हो सकती है, यू नो?
बुक का पर्पस ही लॉन्गर शेल्फ लाइफ है।
एग्जैक्टली।
आई मीन डिजिटल कंटेंट कुड बी, you know, 24 घंटे के अंदर it has to peak and then it will
has to
perhaps
be
fall. Yeah.
correct. But I think that is the way of the world right now. But watching him make something out of his book even after so long, sort of gave me that confidence. So I think parents को कभी कभी देखकर ये लगता है कि what you learn is that, you know, things like these, that there is no point in being anxious about something that you've put out to the world and that it's going to lose its essence or its meaning or its importance.
Ajay, another thing, and I'd rather ask you this here rather than later. Of course, we'll talk about your journey in films and so on. But what you are doing right now is you're in the films and media space, and you've also authored a book. And since we've spoken about shelf life, how are you juggling between the two worlds? Because books ke andar, what you're trying to do is make a product or make something which will essentially, you know, in books we're trying कि हमारे बाद भी वो किताब रहे, वो कहीं ना कहीं वो आवाज़, वो शब्द रहे ज़रूर, किसी ना किसी के लाइब्रेरी में रहेंगे या किसी कहीं पे कोई पढ़ेगा उन्हें। आई मीन मैं अपनी किताब की बात करूँ, जब मैं लिख रहा था आई वुड पिक अकबर्स टेक्स्ट, तो अकबर के जीवन के बारे में जानना पड़ रहा है मुझे, यू नो, थ्रू दीज बुक्स ओनली। तो किताब का एक लंबा एक शेल्फ लाइफ रहता है, और उसी थॉट प्रोसेस से मुझे लगता है कि कई राइटर्स लिखते भी हैं। आप ये सोच के नहीं लिखते कि भाई ओवरनाइट वो बुक सक्सेस बन जाएगी एंड यू नो इट विल बी अ नेशनल सेंसेशन और समथिंग लाइक दैट, बट यू राइट इट नोइंग दैट इट विल टेक इट्स टाइम, एंड ऑफ कोर्स you write a story when the story, you know, is so prepared and, you know, bursting, ready to get, you know, burst out of you. और दूसरा वर्ल्ड जो आपका है वो कंटेंट का है, वो वीडियोस का है, वो मूवीज़ का है। डिजिटल फॉर्मेट के अंदर अब जब मूवीज़ आ रही हैं या कंटेंट आ रहा है, वहाँ पे आप बैटल कर रहे हो एक छोटे छोटे यू नो सेकेंड्स के टाइम स्पैन के अटेंशन के लिए। सो हियर्स अ वर्ल्ड विच इज़ परहैप्स जगलिंग और मैनेजिंग समहाउ between very short attention span,
yeah.
and then you've written a, you know, a book which requires a longish one. How are you juggling between the two, or is it your creative self which was finding expression in both these worlds?
Well, actually, you know, what you mentioned is great, लेकिन ये जो आपने mention किया है, ये this is an external thing. This is external of what I'm creating. तो अगर मैं कुछ क्रिएट करने बैठूं, चाहे वो एक बुक हो, चाहे वो एक वीडियो हो, चाहे वो फिल्म हो, जो भी हो, वो क्रिएशन, उसमें जितना टाइम लगता है क्रिएट करने के लिए, दैट इज म्यूचुअली एक्सक्लूसिव ऑफ द अटेंशन स्पैन ऑफ द ऑडियंस।
Okay. So, but that's a selfish take at it, ना? मतलब there's you're telling us about कि आपको समय लगा उस चीज़ को बनाने के लिए, और दोनों को ही बनाने के लिए it's taken some, you know, mental work, it's taken some teamwork, it's found its expression finally in this form or that form. But दोनों ही forms अगर हम audience के perspective से देखें are two different kinds of content. While developing it, would you consider it कि ये दोनों अलग अलग तरह के formats हैं? Because you know, sort of you do. तो how do you see it? Because you're juggling both of them.
In my mind, okay, I'll address that. In my mind, I first of all don't see that as juggling. Like I was trying to say, कि when you have the creative energy, आप उसको किसी भी दिशा में ले जा सकते हैं. You know, आप उसको कैसे create करना है, वो medium का of course अपना skill set होता है कि चाहे आप उसको film के लिए create करें, video के लिए या book के लिए, उसका skill set अलग हो सकता है. लेकिन मेरे लिए वो juggling नहीं है.
Okay.
लेकिन हाँ ये है कि अगर आपको अपनी voice पहुंचानी है लोगों तक इन अ सर्टन फैशन, इट्स लाइक व्हाट इज योर एंड गोल, मैं क्या चाहती हूँ और कितने समय में चाहती हूँ, देन दैट विल इम्पैक्ट व्हाट आई क्रिएट. देन इट कुड बी जगलिंग. फॉर इंस्टेंस, अब जैसे कि आपका क्वेश्चन सही भी है उस तरीके से कि मुझे ये बुक लिखने में 1.5-2 साल लगे, ठीक है ना. आई मे नॉट बी एबल टू गिव दैट मच टाइम टू क्रिएट समथिंग विच से इज मोर इमीडिएट. Suppose I'm talking about current affairs thing, or something which is at present a hot topic, or it's something which I feel in the next few months is going to be something which,
Or even a TikTok video.
yeah, well, TikTok.
You've written so much about it. The early few chapters
of all
have a
things,
lot of
हाँ ये
TikTok.
तब था ना, अब तो
Now it's reels.
हाँ तो एग्जैक्टली अब आई गेट व्हाट यू आर सेइंग. तो अब जैसे मैंने बुक लिखी एंटरटेनमेंट इंडस्ट्री के ऊपर, ठीक है, उसके लिए मुझे बहुत समय लगा. लेकिन जो एज बीइंग पार्ट ऑफ एंटरटेनमेंट इंडस्ट्री अगर मुझे कुछ रील्स बनानी है या कुछ बनाना है, सो येस आई विल सी समथिंग विच प्रॉबली कुड बी ट्रेंडिंग, विच कुड बी समथिंग विच माइट बी इम्पैक्टफुल इन दैट मोमेंट, विच आई वुड वांट टू क्रिएट. उसमें भी थॉट लगेगा, लेकिन हाँ उसमें जगलिंग में इतना नहीं होता. इट्स जस्ट बेसिकली पुटिंग इट डाउन दैट व्हाट डू यू वांट आउट ऑफ दैट थिंग. समय होता है तो दे सकते हैं. अब मैंने बुक लिखी जब मेरे पास समय था, व्हेन द फर्स्ट लॉकडाउन हैड हैपेंड, तो तब आई हैड टाइम.
You were in Mumbai or you were back home?
I was luckily back home. I just a week before the lockdown, so I was fortunate enough to be with my family during that time. But but उस समय मैं बॉम्बे में ही थी.
So then, of course, why is the book titled Take Number 2020, the mother of all retakes?
It is titled Take Number 2020 because you know आप clapperboard जब करते हैं shoot पे, before each time the clapper boy will come and say scene number, shot number, take number. So what is the scene, what is the shot, and उस shot को बनाने के लिए कितने takes लगे. So it's called Take Number 2020 because of course 2020, the year that happened to all of us, to the planet. And Take Number also, it's symbolic in terms of 2020 as a number that sometimes it takes us so many takes to arrive at that one goal that we are trying to achieve. So it is symbolic in that sense, and also very, very plain and simple that it's about films and it's about the pandemic. So
Then,
Take Number 2020.
So after your LSR, you went to Symbiosis, Pune.
Yes.
And what did you study there?
I did media. I studied film, specialized in films, audiovisual production. Yes.
Okay. And which part of it, as in direction or?
No, so in Symbiosis, they had 4 specializations, which was journalism, public relations, advertising, and audiovisual production. तो audiovisual में सब आता था, films आता था, TV आता था, radio आता था. So there was not like FTII में बहुत specific हो जाता that you want to specialize in direction or camera or editing. यहाँ पे we learn everything. So by the end of those 2 years, हमको कुछ 7 films बनानी थी to write, direct, and edit ourselves. So we had to, and it had to be a combination of documentary and fiction. So and then write a thesis, a dissertation. So वो सब जमा करके ही आपको अपनी degree, you would be eligible to get a degree. So
And you passed out in which year?
I graduated in 2009.
Okay, so right after LSR you went to
Yes,
Symbiosis.
yes.
And 2009, did you shift to Mumbai?
Yes, yes. My first job was with the UTVI News. It was a business news channel. And क्योंकि मैंने and वो journalism वाला space हो जाता है, लेकिन even in that journalism space, news channel, business news channel में क्या होता है, जो weekend shows होते हैं, those are lifestyle shows. So automobiles, art, all of those things, and you get to be the show producer. Like if that is of interest. So that was very specific to the specialization I had come out of. So I wanted to specifically look after, be a show producer, and I got interviewed by the features lifestyle department. But फिर उन्होंने ये कह दिया कि रिसेशन चल रहा है तो हम आपको न्यूज़ डेस्क में ही डाल सकते हैं. सो न्यूज़ डेस्क मीन्स एडिटोरियल, एंड एट दैट टाइम, well, the whole recession thing was, you know, it was more of a smoke screen, but I said, okay, let me just take.
You remember those times?
I do remember
That
those
was also the time जब उसी से
I
कुछ
do
time
remember
पहले
this time. My first day, I remember, I'll tell you, May 18th, 2009. May 18th, 2009 was, was my interview day, was my first day at my job. I mean, big deal for me, so I would remember. But I also remembered it because when I went, they made me sit in the lobby area for close to 3 hours, 4 hours, because that day the market had shut down because there was overselling.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be one big epic day for the market, like in the good way. And people, the traders and everybody was super happy. And so there was breaking news, and the newsroom was in some state of, whirlwind. And my immediate boss was not able to sort of, like you have when you orient an intern or a trainee or a joinee, a new person. He did not have the time for that because he was just basically like addressing immediate programming crisis. So I was sitting in the lobby waiting, watching the news, asking the receptionist ki kab jaane denge. So that was my first day. And yes, but
And you were there for how long?
I was there. I actually did not stick around for very long there because news desk and business news was essentially all that market news, which was really not my interest at all. But I had taken up that job because I thought maybe in moving within the departments would be something that I could consider. It's easier to move within departments rather than to come from the outside.
Yeah.
Like I said, उन्होंने इतना हवा मचा दिया था कि recession है, job नहीं मिलेगा. So I thought कि अब job मिल रहा है, जिस department में भी मिल रहा है ले लो, and then you'll figure your way around inside. But once I was there, there was a merger. UTVI had merged with Bloomberg during that time. So it was in a very sort of strange space. Everybody was, most people were quitting at the time because there were so many things that were not working out for a lot of people, and people within the features lifestyle department were telling me that we want to right now step out and explore. So then I decided that okay, no, maybe not, because it became very depressing for me to be in that part of the market trade and everything, and it all used to just go like this. I had a very hard time trying to sit and understand market news and bulls and bears and all of those things, and I had to sort of sit and with the editorial and make that content, so it was just very hard for me.
So from there, how long did you work there, and where did you go right after?
So I did multiple jobs in the space of media and creative arts. So I worked with a fashion marketing firm for a little bit, and I used to ghostwrite for the fashion designers at the time. So all the magazines, publications that you see, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, all these designer interviews जो देखते हैं, वो सब हम लोग ही बैठ के लिखते थे बेसिकली उनके लिए, डिज़ाइनर नहीं लिखते थे. बट उसमें इतना मुश्किल था नहीं बिकॉज how much can you write about a clothing line कि embellishments हैं और this is the summer couture and this is the winter couture and this is this and this is that. It's more or less the same language. But that was also interesting, and वो दौरान भी अच्छा था कि you get to hang with the fashion designers, so you get to go watch all the fashion shows and be part of all this cool glamorous world for a little bit.
You were editing these interviews for designers or ghostwriting it for them, and there's a certain language that you use, and most of it is English in general. Do you see that contrast? And I think we were talking about how urban India is so obsessed with English.
Yes.
ये contrast को, how do you see it? Is it just the urban India which is too obsessed with English? And I think I want to talk about Mumbai also and this film industry per se. Do you think, and a couple of days ago, जब ये 100th anniversary के राज कपूर जी के 100th anniversary के लिए the entire Kapoor family had flown in and प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से मिलने गए थे उनको न्योता देने के लिए. तो उस आमंत्रण के जो वीडियो वायरल हुआ था उसके अंदर कई लोगों ने ट्वीट किया था कि परिवार वैसे तो helm or top of the game in Bollywood or film industry, but they cannot frame two sentences properly in Hindi. what do you think? What's your take on that? Only if you can answer that.
No, no, of course, of course. There is nothing that we are here to talk about these things. नहीं, ऐसा है जैसे मैंने आपको बोला अभी थोड़े टाइम पहले आपने
कोई
मुझसे
हिंदी से
पूछा
शर्म है?
कहाँ रहते हैं, तो इंग्लिश का ऑब्सेशन है बिकॉज आवर माइंड्स आर कॉलोनाइज्ड, राइट? और I will just divert this. I mean, I'll just go around the block a little bit and come back to the point that in school, English medium school में हमको एक ऑप्शन दिया गया था in class 8th कि आपको 3 लैंग्वेजेस के बीच में से एक लैंग्वेज चूज करना है. English being the constant, Hindi, Sanskrit, and in my case it was German. So we were given a choice. We had to choose between 3 languages, and that would be the language that we'll learn from class 8 onwards. Which, you know, अपने ही देश में आपको हिंदी या संस्कृत में से चूज करना पड़ रहा है, you know, and then you're given a foreign language, right? So where it starts from there. It starts from there in the cities, and we have this education system is the ये ब्रिटिशर्स की तो देन है अभी तक तो ये जो एजुकेशन सिस्टम पिछले 100 साल से चल रहा है. सो ऑफ कोर्स इट इज़ गोइंग टू बी अ माइंडसेट चेंज, नो, इट विल नॉट जस्ट बी लैंग्वेज. सो ये इंग्लिश भाषा जो है, इट इज़ सीन एज समथिंग व्हिच इज़, इफ़ यू स्पीक द लैंग्वेज एंड यू स्पीक इट वेल, देन यू नो यू आर कंसिडर्ड टू बी a certain way. You looked up, so to speak. And if you speak in Hindi or you speak बहुत शुद्ध हिंदी में बात करोगे तो फिर आपको एक दूसरा एक पर्सपेक्टिव देते हैं. ऐसा है जनरल आउटलुक.
Minds are colonized.
करेक्ट,
Fairly
करेक्ट.
colonized.
बट जैसे अब स्मॉल टाउन्स में जाते हैं तो वहाँ पर भी देखते हैं कि a lot of
वहाँ पर अंग्रेजी एस्पिरेशनल हो गई ना,
एस्पिरेशनल है.
क्योंकि टियर 2 इज प्लानिंग और इट्स वर्किंग हार्ड टू बिकम टियर 1.
Yes.
और टियर 1 के अंदर हिंदी या कोई आपका लोकल जो मतलब मुंह बोली है उसकी आपको कोई बहुत ज़्यादा वैल्यू नहीं मिल रही होती.
नहीं मिलती है.
तो टियर 1 को एमुलेट करने की कोशिश कर रहा होता है टियर 2. उनके दिमाग में एस्पिरेशनल लैंग्वेज कौन सी है? अंग्रेजी है. तो मैं ये बात कहीं पे कह रहा था कि जो जिनको अंग्रेजी नहीं आती ना, उनसे अगर बात करें ना कि अंग्रेजी क्या वैल्यू है, उनकी डेफिनेशन कुछ और ही है. मतलब ये तो आज से 100 साल पहले तो लोगों की जॉब्स इस बात पर लगी होती थी कि अंग्रेजी आती है. इनफैक्ट 100 साल की, पिछले 50-60 साल की बात करूँ, इंग्लिश वॉज द लैंग्वेज दैट पीपल वांटेड टू लर्न, क्योंकि उनको ये गारंटी थी कि अंग्रेजी आ गई तो और कुछ ना हो, सेक्रेटरियल जॉब्स होंगी, क्लर्क जॉब्स होंगी, या फिर ऑफिस मैनेजमेंट का जॉब्स होगा, दे विल डू वेल. तो ये तो इट्स अ कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ दैट कॉलोनाइज्ड माइंड, इट्स अ कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ एंग्लिकल एजुकेशन एंड द कॉलोनियल सिस्टम ऑफ एजुकेशन. And sadly, like you pointed out, it's reflected in modern age also. कि मतलब, but South Indian film industry is perhaps different.
I'm not very familiar with South Indian film industry per se, but if
And
you
there
see
are a lot
South
of them,
India,
Kannada,
if you see, it's a
Telugu.
reflection. But of course, जैसे अभी क्या हो रहा है, you know, they say, in my opinion, it is like if you go local, you go global, right? It is not to look down upon any language, including English. We have to, if English helps us communicate with people outside of India in a better way and gives us certain opportunities, yes, we must know the language. There's nothing wrong with any language per se. लेकिन अब उसको you know, to make that as a choice between our own language or our mother tongue and between English, and then therefore to snub some other language, that in my opinion is incorrect, is not right, it's not fair, and it is and that's where we only tend to lose over a period of time. हम सिर्फ भाषा नहीं खोते हैं, फिर हम उसके साथ में जो छोटी छोटी चीज़ें जुड़ी हैं, जो भी उसके साथ के ट्रेडिशंस जुड़े हैं, हम वो भी खोते हैं. एंड दैट इज़ आई थिंक द थिंग विद नॉर्थ इंडिया एंड साउथ इंडिया. सो व्हाट यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द हिंदी फिल्म इंडस्ट्री एंड पीपल working in Hindi movies but not being able to speak 2 sentences in Hindi outside of the filming set is, I think it's a reflection, वही है कि it's a reflection of how they see themselves or how they want to be seen, or who are the people that they want to be, and how do they want to project themselves. मेरे ख्याल से तो यही हो सकता है. अब और कुछ है तो होगा,
but do you think
maybe it's become a part of one's lifestyle. And साउथ में अपनी ट्रेडिशन या जो भी है, आई एम नॉट सेइंग वन इज सुपीरियर देन द अदर, आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट, बट साउथ में दे स्पीक देयर लैंग्वेज and they know their language.
They
They've grown up.
they appreciate
It's
and
just a
are proud
part
of
of
it.
it's an extension of their life. So when they are making those films, good, bad, whatever, they're celebrating their language even outside of the cinemas, and they're speaking that, they are just being themselves. No, they're just what it is. And sooner or later, then the world starts appreciating you. If you are respecting yourself and you're respecting your own culture, the world will respect you, or give you that sort of, it's just that
Art does not
you
necessarily
don't
need to
lose
know
your
the language.
identity in trying to please somebody else.
But since you are in the industry, since you have been in the industry or seen it from close quarters, would you also say कि actually consumer पे भी depend करता है कि since you find you know हिंदी movies की audience इतनी huge है, तो movies के अंदर हिंदी बोली जाती है, but drawing rooms के अंदर अंग्रेजी बोली जाती है.
हाँ,
That's also a clear possibility, क्योंकि घर तो हिंदी से चल रहा है, ठीक है,
correct.
पर घर में फिर भी अंग्रेजी बोली जाएगी.
लेकिन आप एक चीज़ नोटिस करिए, अभी जो people are now beginning to take interest back in their own languages, if you notice, and I think that is also that's the positive impact of OTT channels, क्योंकि अब बहुत सारी vernacular language के जो content है वो सामने आ रहा है, and we are consuming a lot of regional cinema and television that we did not have access to earlier before OTT in as much, right? So अब जैसे this movie, why am I forgetting the name? In which there was this in South, it's a South film, and
Pushpa.
not Pushpa also, of course, but the film that I'm talking about, in which there is this dance, this
Triple R,
spiritual
RRR, spiritual.
Kantara, right. So now Kantara did so well, and it's very, very specific about this particular
Community and that village,
community, and it's so specific, it's so niche that, you know, beyond maybe a few thousands of people, they are not even touched by that.
But you see, there's
suddenly
something.
look at that scale of business that the film did.
That's something remarkable about India also. मतलब वो कहानी तो इतनी localized है, but even people up in Kashmir, Punjab or
Yes.
Haryana can relate to it, and that
Yes.
is something which makes India, you know, our country so special. It's not the administrative divisions or boundaries that define us, or it's not the books or texts or laws that define us. वो धर्म की जो बात है, it is so ingrained and so deep seated in us कि वो कहानी कहीं की भी हो सकती है, but हरियाणा के गांव में बैठा हुआ लड़का उस बात को उससे रिलेट कर सकता है. ऐसी कोई उस मूवी के अंदर, of course the movie is very well made,
Yes.
powerful scenes that make it special. But then rolling back, so I understand that in main films or commercial films you were not able to find strong female characters, but do you think that's changing now?
It is changing, like I said. Yes,
Is it because of
OTT.
OTT? Is it because of new stories? Is it because of absence of great stories that people are looking for something new?
Yes.
Or it's a mix of all? Or are there more women who are perhaps able to, you know, in their
I
own
think
ways voice it out?
Times are changing, and especially post-pandemic.
Post-pandemic?
Post-pandemic, like
Okay.
during the pandemic, there were so many things that people experienced, people felt, people wanted to recalibrate and explore. That really opened up a lot of possibilities for people. And in that process, it's a collective conscious thing, right? That consciousness thing, that you start seeing that shift. And that's why I think when you read the book also, it says it starts out with 2018 BC.
BC. you call
BC,
it.
which here
before.
I've termed as before COVID and after COVID, and there is actually a difference. So in terms of, there has been a shift in how stories are told and how stories, and I think that is also coming from one realizing that there is an absence of good stories. Not because there is a general absence of good stories, but good stories are not being picked up in mainstream. And suddenly people are feeling that, you know, and that is also because writers are not being compensated. Film writers have not been compensated that well. You know, the limelight and the paychecks, the heavy paychecks, are taken by the top brass. So everywhere else there is a cut down. Even as an actor, as an upcoming actor, or you're, you know, as a newcomer, you don't get paid that well. You know, and casting agencies, they will take a chunk of commission. Everybody will tell you that, oh, but you're getting visibility. you're getting exposure. Why should we have to pay you? You look what you're getting in return. And that is also one of the things that I addressed in the book is that, आपका, and ये pandemic के time पे भी हुआ था. A lot of artists felt the hit. That how are they going to suddenly, they felt, how are they going to earn their money? If they do stage shows, they do performances, live performances, how are they going to make that, make ends meet? Because for a lot of people, that is their bread and, that was their bread and butter. So going on the internet, there was actually this running joke, which between my circle of friends in theatre and everyone, they were like, yeah, now what are you going to do with all the money that you've earned? That is, there's a meme, I think, कि एक खाली प्लेट है और एक चम्मच है, एक फोक है, एक नाइफ है और एक कढ़ाई है. तो उसमें कुछ डाल रहे हैं, कुछ भी नहीं है, खाली है, बस जेस्चर्स हो रहा है, माइमिंग हो रहा है ऑफ पुटिंग समथिंग, ऑफ कुकिंग समथिंग. इट्स नथिंग, okay? And then serving that nothing on your plate and saying that what I get from all the exposure. This is how I make my food, with all the exposure I get from from the art that I'm supposed to get exposure from. तो ये है कि उस टाइम पे लोगों को समझ आया that you have to, how can you not compensate an artist rightly?
You've touched on multiple, that industry. Tell us a bit about that film industry. What were your early exposures and experiences? कि है क्या, is it as organized? Is it informal? The entire idea of nepotism, the families dominate करते हैं नहीं करते, काम कैसे मिलता है? How to crack through that industry? Because you've tried to touch it through different characters in your book as well. Tell us a bit about it, please.
In the film industry, first of all, I did not see a lot of structure for a newcomer. You have to be everywhere. It's basically you're on your own till you find a solid backing. And it can be a boon and it can be a bane. मतलब अच्छी चीज़ भी हो सकती है, नहीं भी हो सकती.
Tell more. How?
In the sense, boon in the sense that then you are on your, then you create stuff.
Then you create stuff.
Then you find ways to create stuff. This book was an accidental book. I'll start off with giving my own personal example to answer your question. How it can be a boon that, like I said, I felt underwhelmed with the characters that were written for females, and so female actors, and so I thought, मैं लिख सकती हूँ. I've been writing most part of my professional life, so I can write. What is stopping me? And I've studied film, so I know how to write a script. So I can write. What is stopping me? So I wrote. And I wrote that as a script for a web series. मैंने episode 1, 2, 3, 4 ऐसे करके लिखा. उसको bullet points, मतलब just I was putting a story together. जब मैंने उसको expand करना शुरू किया तो मुझे लगा ये episode जो है एक chapter बन सकता है. And then there was so much to say. So then it became a chapter. Then I started writing and I started exploring all these characters in further depth. And it therefore became a book. So at one point I was like, what is stopping me from making it a book also, if I have something to say? So the point is that this is one way of looking at it and one way of working it out on how do you want to find a foot in the door. एक वो structure है. लेकिन there were people whom a lot of my friends जो सुबह 9 बजे उठते थे, 9 बजे अपना निकल जाते थे, बैग, डफल बैग में चेंज ऑफ क्लोथ्स, शूज़, मेकअप सब रख के, एंड फ्रॉम दैट टाइम टिल द इवनिंग, till whatever time the casting studios were open, or production houses were open, they would just set out for the day. They would go from one place to the other. Aram Nagar is one of those areas where in Bombay जहाँ पे बहुत सारे casting studios, production studios, offices हैं. तो auditions होती हैं वहाँ पे, कुछ नहीं हो रहा है तो एक टाइम स्लॉट होता है, जैसे 11 to 1 इन सर्टन स्पेसेस जाके यू गो एंड जस्ट गिव एन इंट्रोडक्शन, सो यू पार्ट ऑफ द डेटाबेस. सो ये लोग निकल जाते थे. कुछ मेरे फ्रेंड्स जो एक्टर्स दे लाइक क्लॉक वर्क एवरी मॉर्निंग, जैसे काम पे जा रहे हैं, ऑफिस जा रहे हैं, दैट काइंड, सो एवरी डे दे वुड गो फ्रॉम से 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then evenings they would meet friends, and those were intentional meetings in the sense they were not just casual meetings, he just chai peene chale gaye, but intentional meetings with people who could be sort of a network for them to create. So constantly when you're doing that, then you're a hustler. Then you're just finding ways कि आप किसके through आप किसको मिल सकते हो who could be a sort of So essentially, while you're working on your craft, that's one aspect. You also have to work on finding the right people to interact with, or to just sort of be there in that zone, in that circle. So that was one aspect. And so in that sense, there is no structure per se, because you're on your own. Nobody's telling you what to do. You know, that is your way of looking at it. The other is that there is a certain stream. Somebody, when you say आपने कुछ काम कर लिया है, आपने कुछ टीवी सीरीज एड्स कुछ कर लिया है, you're somewhat visible, you're already in that circle, people, the casting studios know you, you're on their database, they are calling you. अच्छा, now then they will start calling you specifically. पहले तो आप जाओगे, कोई नहीं जानता, आप इंट्रोडक्शन दोगे, आप एक आध कोई ऑडिशन दोस्त दोस्त बनाओगे, कर लोगे. And then gradually after you spent a little time over there, then the casting studios pick up that, you know, ये है, लुक्स वाइज हमको कोई कैरेक्टर चाहिए, या डायलेक्ट वाइज कोई कैरेक्टर चाहिए, या फिर जो भी स्पेसिफिकेशंस के हिसाब से कोई कैरेक्टर चाहिए, या फिर इट्स ओपन टू ऑल, दैट काइंड ऑफ थिंग. एंड सो देन दे विल कॉल यू कि हमारे पास एक ऐसा कैरेक्टर है, ऑडिशन के लिए आप आ सकते हैं. समटाइम्स दोज आर वेरी, दोज काइंड ऑफ कॉल्स ऑल्सो कम. सो ग्रेजुअली यू फाइंड, you when you start getting to know people, you start understanding how this works. So I would say that there is a structure, but there is not a structure also. Like, you have to be on your own, you have to find your own feet initially as a newcomer. ठीक है, तो this is for most people. Yes, if somebody is coming from a film background, then they already know that, because they already know the people they want to reach out to. They already have a network. The difference between somebody who comes from a film family and who does not is that network. Essentially, the people you know, and the people you know well, right? Because eventually it is, films are made on that basis, right? That who is it that you know, and then how do you, forget the actors, but even the producers, directors, when they will create something, they will only go to people they already know, right? So they will not audition for producers, they will not audition for directors, people who are the actual makers of the film. They will only go to people they already know, right? Essentially. So it just works like that.
So networking is an important part of the
yeah
game.
So it is just, that is how it works. And you begin to start finding a method to that madness on your own. Then the other aspect is that when you've already done some work, then there are talent agencies that want a pound of flesh, and that you know, okay, आप थोड़े visible हैं, अब हम आपको sign up करना चाहेंगे.
Off late have talent agencies really taken off? As in, I find Dharma and Yash Raj, they have their own different talent.
Now everybody is making, yes. See, the role of a talent agency will always be there, in the sense that how else will the actor or the artist reach out to get those platforms on their own? They will eventually need to have, say, a team. Like I said, it's different for people who are already established, for actors and artists who are already established. They need that kind of a team to make it work for them, in terms of finding those people, finding those platforms, finding those avenues and opportunities. But for a newcomer, they essentially have to first start off on their own only. And they have to go and look at, keep working, keep auditioning till they find their work. And eventually, they can also sign up with agencies that are willing to take newcomers on board.
Are you arguing that having the skill is just the basic requisite?
Not always. Not always. Sometimes, in some cases, it is just, I mean, I'm just saying that in some cases it is the people you know. In some cases it is also people, there are some people who look a certain way.
Okay, so
It is a visual medium, right? So a lot of people do invest time in how they look.
now you've written about it
How their
in the book
physicality
also.
is. Yes.
I mean,
So-
that's something that I must appreciate.
And skill is essential. It's absolutely essential, especially when you don't know people. Then you have to
Have to have skill.
you have to have your skill. You have to have your talent, because what else are you going to get any project on? But there are some people. Like यही है, वो colonized mindset वाला concept भी है कि बहुत सारे लोग बाहर से भी आते हैं and they take over certain roles because they look a certain way.
And I think you've expressed that in the book very well.
Yes.
Can you give a brief about the book before I ask you the question? What is Take Number 2020 about?
So, okay, Take Number 2020 is basically a story of these 4 migrant actors. Migrant क्योंकि बॉम्बे में it's a cosmopolitan city और यहाँ पे सारे लोग बाहर से आते हैं, you know, to become actors from different parts,
But
different
did you notice
socioeconomic.
मूवी स्टार्ट करने से पहले गणपति बप्पा मोरया ही बोला जाता है?
हाँ हाँ, क्योंकि हम सबसे पहले किसी भी इवन इन डांस, सो आई एम लर्निंग भरतनाट्यम राइट नाउ, इवन इन डांस हम सबसे पहले गणेश जी की पूजा करते हैं.
No, so why I'm
तो
saying this so
it is regardless of which socioeconomic or linguistic background you come from.
no, in Punjab you might not start anything मतलब कोई शुभ काम करने से पहले ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप गणपति की पूजा करते हो. बट गणपति की पूजा नेसेसरीली महाराष्ट्र पॉपुलर भी है, वहाँ पे गणपति विसर्जन होता है गणपति पूजा के लिए. बट आई नोटिस कि you've written in the book कि वो शुभ काम, वो मूवी शूट स्टार्ट होता है, एवरीबडी इन द ऑन द सेट सेज कि गणपति बप्पा मोरया. सो ऐसा नहीं है कि सो यू इट माइट बी अ कॉस्मोपॉलिटन सिटी, बट the city is giving you a fresh or a new identity, which is the fundamental of the city.
Yes, but I don't see why being a cosmopolitan city and starting off a shoot with Ganpati Bappa Moria has, I mean they're not correlated.
नहीं, मैं उसके कोई comparison या कोई question नहीं है, it's just a comment कि ऐसा नहीं है. People might come from all quarters of life.
Yes,
people might come
yes.
from all different
Yeah, but
backgrounds.
I suppose when you're in that region and it is
वहीं से शुरुआत
हाँ, आप वहाँ से शुरू करते हैं कि उसमें कोई बाधा ना आए, कोई अड़चने ना आए कि आपकी फिल्म अच्छी बन जाए, आपको सक्सेस मिल जाए, जो भी होता है, the prayers that you largely what you wish for before you start a project is, and then overall in a Hindu culture as India, it is believed that गणपति को हम गणेश जी को हम पूजा करते हैं to remove all our obstacles. तो essentially is that. So अब हम region पे नहीं जाएंगे, पंजाब फिल्म इंडस्ट्री में शायद नहीं करते होंगे, लेकिन that is one aspect. But essentially when we're talking about the Hindi film industry, which is the largest in India in that sense, one of the largest.
When you say it's largest, is it because of the number of movies it's producing?
I suppose. Then I said also one of the largest, because now we are also seeing South films, the South film industry. So the economics of it, I would not know or understand. But yes, in terms of there are say 3-4 big production houses, top production houses in the Hindi film industry that rule, and so the kind of films that we've grown up watching mostly in the north, and that is kind of taken over the entertainment. That whets the entertainment appetite of the masses in general. So by virtue of the number of people watching, by virtue of the business it does, it's a combination of factors. By virtue of how these production houses have grown into big media companies, and they themselves have their own talent agencies now. So they're also acquiring. So the acquisition aspect of it also. So all of this, I think, combined defines the business. So I think the business would only define how big an industry is, right?
I think
in terms of what it is doing. So
it was a biography of, I think, Karan Johar, and then of course I think Netflix या किसी पे एक show भी आया था about one of the production houses कि how the industry has sort of changed and upscaled so much that it's become a with Reliance coming in and big houses, industrial houses
become
coming
a corporatized sort of space, huh?
So does that hamper the creative process in any way?
I think it does, no, to an extent. Sometimes, I mean, again, like it's a double-edged sword. It can see at times when you have an idea, when you have great ideas. Okay, थिएटर में हम लोग यही बात करते थे कि हमारे पास आइडियाज़ हैं, हमारे पास टैलेंट है, हमारे पास स्टोरी है, सब कुछ है. क्या नहीं है? पैसा नहीं है. उसको एग्जीक्यूट करने के लिए पैसा नहीं है. When you see Broadway shows or you see all those shows, opera in the West, they are solid productions because they are being backed and funded well, so that creativity can get a platform. So I think they both go hand in hand, the monetary aspect of it and also the creative aspect of it. In order to be able to give your creativity a platform, you will need to fund it on the scale that you want to fund it, right? तो बट कई बारी क्या होता है, जब वो फाइनेंस ही पूरा मेन स्टे बन जाता है किसी चीज़ का और नंबर्स ही एक मेन स्टे बन जाते हैं किसी चीज़ का, तो फिर आप सोचते हो, वही आपने जो मुझसे पहले पूछा कि जगल कैसे करते हो, हाउ डू यू जगल विद द अटेंशन स्पैन ऑफ अ बुक वर्सेस अ रील. So then it's just about, suppose I want numbers, and I said at that time, it's what your end goal is. आप क्या चाहते हो? What is your end goal? So yes, we always want everything. You know, I want the critical acclaim, and I want the commercial success, and I want the numbers, and I want the fan following, and I want everything. We always want everything.
I think it was Pooja Bhatt
But
in one of those interviews where she said that every person who is trying to become who is a critical success and is cribbing about commercial success is actually fighting hard to become a commercial success. You know, because you're not perhaps able to make that, you know, that commercial film a success or attain that success in commercial film industry. So you're cribbing and complaining about it. But at the end of the day, that's where the money is, that's where perhaps masses are, and that's where the goal is, because fame and fortune are two things that people are perhaps vying for when they're in the film industry.
yes, yes.
Three F's.
But you can also be, sorry, just I wanted to add to that, that you can also be famous and have great fortune. But if in that process, in trying to constantly get to that, you know, you yourself as an artist forget your art. And we have to, and I have to say this, we have to keep renewing our, I mean, we have to keep learning.
Renewing your vows to the, you know, to the craft.
Yes. So we cannot keep riding on what we did 20 years back. जो कि चला industry में एक थोड़ा said है that thing है that, you know, a lot of people are riding on their previous laurels, especially something which is done really well, you know. And the thing is that we have to, in order for an artist, for a real artist to present great art at every point or regularly, they have to keep dismantling those notions that they've built of themselves. So it's a very mental thing, and a lot of times it's very difficult because it's like the illusionist. What is that saying? The illusionist buys his own illusion.
But
So
you make an important point, but isn't that something that people are actually trying to do also deliberately? कि आप कुछ काम करते हो and you want people to know you, और वो आपकी reputation बन जाती है. Say some actor is doing.
fair enough. If I've written this book and this book does really well, I get what your question is, so I just wanted to jump in with that response. That they say Take Number 2020 becomes the bestest seller, and, you know, I get all the fame from Take Number 2020. But I then do not upskill on my writing, on my storytelling, and I start writing books based on, and I sell it only as, you know, the best-selling author of Take Number 2020, and I write 10 more books after that, and they're all crap, without having upskilled on the storytelling or on the writing, without having put myself. So I can enjoy the success of something that I have made, but to let that come in the way when I'm sitting down and creating, when it is just me and my craft, and I let what my laurels are previously eclipse that and take over that and have a stamp all over what I'm creating afresh, is going to be a problem eventually for me.
Isn't this what we discussed earlier during our conversation? Okay, creating something or doing something creative, you of course want to consider आपकी audience क्या है, but you don't really know how the audience may or may not respond. आप अपनी तरफ से best effort करते हैं. That's something that you swear by. You pick up a project, आप ये कसम खाते हैं कि मैं ये project को जो मेरे set objectives हैं, if I want it to be funny, if I want it to be intriguing, if I want it to be creative, if I want to be, you know, horror or whatever, मैं ये tone से उस पे काम करना start करता हूँ और मैं अपना best effort डालता हूँ. ठीक? After I have finished it and I put it out in the market, it's actually the market and it's the audience who are going to be a judge of it. I do not know of any actors, producers or directors who would say that they did not put their 100% in making a remarkable product. Of course they were upskilling themselves, of course they were doing 10 other things, but you do not necessarily know, you know, what just might work. I mean, how about that then? Okay, say, how can you say that, you know, somebody did, you know, last movie was a fair success, or wo is movie ke andar he is not putting his 100%? Of course he is.
I'm not saying somebody not putting their 100%.
Or upskilling themselves.
I'm saying that when you, as a creative person, as an artist person, then when you're creating, you're only creating. Then you're not what is the word? Then you're not the famous person sitting in your room and writing. Then you're just that person. So if you're creating what you're creating with that with that value system in place, with that integrity in place, and not being affected by your own fame, then you're creating something. चाहे वो बाद में किसी को पसंद आए ना आए, of course those are things that you will take into consideration when you're creating something. ये नहीं कह रही कि आप isolation में काम कर रहे हैं, उस isolation में काम नहीं कर रहे हैं. Of course पहली किताब भी जो लिख रहे हैं आप, पहली फिल्म भी बना रहे हो, तो yes एक सोच होती है, एक मेरी भी सोच ये थी that you know what is the story I want to tell. You have to know your audience. I'm not saying don't know your audience. What I'm saying is what your audience thinks of you. And what that projection, because we all have a project, we will all project, right? At some point it's a stage. This is a stage. I'm sitting and we are talking. This is also a stage. It doesn't mean that I'm being inauthentic. It just means that I've written my book, but I've made that in isolation, and I've poured everything that I've had into that story, understanding who my audience is and understanding everything. And now I'm putting this book out there. So when I write my next book, I cannot ride on the coattails of the success of my previous work and think that that is going to take me forward in life. That's what I mean.
Since we're talking about Bollywood, tell me some stories, or what are the
you want all the juicy, basically. You want all the concepts.
Give us a juicy snippets. We've done a lot of philosophical conversation. I think my team also has enjoyed that bit, but I think now they want some juicy stuff.
I think they're giving you the looks ki ab pooch. Ab ye wala question pooch.
This one wants to know about Noora Fateh.
Ooh, you want to? Listen, I don't know Noora Fateh and all. I don't know. I mean, just because I've written a book on Bollywood doesn't mean that you'll ask me, now tell me about Shah Rukh Khan. Now tell me about so and so.
But you never know.
Yeah, but you never know.
But in any case, who's been your inspiration as in acting?
Who's been my inspiration in acting? Ooh, okay.
Give a desi name. हमारी audience थोड़ी देसी है. Don't bring.
ये तो पहले बोल के gossip दो, फिर ये question पूछ
और
लिया.
gossip के अंदर वो बेचारा नोरा फतेही के लिए इतने देर से इंतजार कर रहा था.
Yeah, but Noora Fateh's stories also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she was she took a chance. I think she took a leap of faith and she came here. And on the basis of her talent of dance, she found that inroad. So there is no specific way to actually find an entry or a foothold in the industry, right? Because Bollywood is so much about song and dance. So if you have that talent, it's just, it is cherry on the icing. It is something which can get you noticed, which can get you. And then sometimes a lot of people, as far as acting is concerned, then they start learning while their mainstay could be, say, dance or music. And then they find their inroad into the industry.
This guy, I think Raghav.
So Noora.
The guy who worked in dance or performed in Dance India Dance, and then he became a host also.
Yeah.
And he did a movie recently, I think, Kill. Is the movie where he sort of was the
So वही है ना, visibility वाली बात है. It's basically that if you're putting your talent, and which is great because ये platform ही ऐसा है that इसमें आपको as an actor क्या बोलते हैं, even not just in this industry, not just in the Hindi film industry, in any industry, in any language film industry, because an actor has to don so many hats on screen by virtue of being that character. So the more कभी कोई कुछ सीख रहा है, कोई हॉर्स राइडिंग सीख रहा है, कोई कुछ स्पोर्ट सीख रहा है, कोई कुछ डांस या म्यूजिक सीख रहा है, कोई कुछ they're always, it's not just you're learning acting, you're learning so many other things which are adding to your talent.
Just to become fairly successful actor also, because you need to, when you're playing those characters, you can perhaps
show them on screen that
well.
widens your sort of what I mean, that opens up a lot of opportunities for you, to portray different characters on screen.
He was a junior in college. I see he's in Bollywood. I think he's done one of the series also on one of these OTT platforms where he plays the protagonist, and he does his daily morning reels are about where he's training or he's learning martial arts.
Jayesh.
He's
the
doing
character.
this.
He's doing this.
And then he had a girlfriend. I think these guys are not together anymore. But his girlfriend, she used to make Instagram reels. So pehle she was a TikToker, then she became Instagram reel, and between that phase, she found a couple of projects, some in South Indian film industry, and another OTT series in in Hindi. So I think there's no clear-cut way to crack it. It's a much like the industry. It's fairly creative. You just have to crack it somehow. You find a way, and once you've sort of, I think you've crossed a threshold. I think then projects keep coming in, and then
हाँ बस वही है that it's about that lucky break which we call lucky is sometimes like say for instance in Nawazuddin Siddiqui's career
Gangs of
graph.
Wasseypur,
I mean he did so many things and there are so many films that you look at and you say you saw Munna Bhai MBBS, he was there.
Yeah.
And you at that time we did not know him as the Nawazuddin Siddiqui as we know him as today, and at one point there were so many other odd jobs that he had probably had to do to sort of
sustain himself and keep
yes.
going.
So
But that's also
Yes,
part
stories.
of the larger life in general, as in all of us are trying to do a bunch of things for this one lucky break, and once that becomes your mainstay, and then you're just
that is true for life, of
Yeah.
course. This is the Hindi film industry is sort of a microcosm of the life that we're all living, that's for sure, and so is any other industry. But ho sakta hai in the corporate world, in certain kinds of other industries, you are probably on a salaried job, so you have a certain support, or you have a certain sense of
Stability.
security.
That you use
मेरा
security
income
and stability, and that's
हाँ,
that's
और
the
जो-
word for government job.
हाँ तो और वो इसमें नहीं है क्योंकि इसमें आपको इंश्योर करना है कि आप you're constantly on your feet, so you're operating in this industry without a sort of sense of security like that, or a certainty that क्या होगा.
And why aren't any characters married?
Is that really a thing to, I mean, usually
but
आते ना पहले होता था ना पहले ज़माने में actors never got married or something, but हाँ actually एक मैंने जैसे बोला एक character थी जो single mother थी वैसे.
But no, the four main characters that you introduce,
Well, I think then you have to now, अब आपने ये पूछ लिया है तो you'll have to tell the camera that you still in the middle of reading the book.
oh, of course, I'm in the middle of reading
so you
the
haven't
book.
gotten to the point where you do actually come across one
but,
of those characters.
But on the back cover, it's written there's Meera.
The four main characters
W,
are not married.
Jayesh and Miki Taneja, four key characters in the book. चारों में से किसी की शादी नहीं हुई है. So it's interesting, and I think I'll say interesting because in Indian society in general, of course, things are changing very fastly and very quickly.
Also, the thing is that.
But is it because of the idea of creative reflection or creative industry that you want to stay in your process, and marriage in any way hinders it? What could be, or it's individuality, or
no, that is not why I kept these characters single. Like I said, this book has come from my own experiences in the film industry as an actor.
So what are since 2009
तो
to
आप वो डालोगे जो
2024?
आपने शायद hopefully नहीं, of course there is imagination also, और ऐसा नहीं है that but that is not.
Part is that in 1.5 decades you did not find a character who was married and would have been interesting, character in your book.
Yeah, well, no.
With that. No
Simple, straight answer, no. I don't know what you're trying to get at, but no.
Well, fair enough. Alrighty. I think there's a bunch of things, of course, if you're talking about Bollywood and romanticizing India, Indian stories that we can talk about. Of course, Bollywood's a remarkable industry for give and take, whatever stories, whatever they're doing, but at the end of the day, they're creating a lot of stuff. Great stuff that has inspired and been essentially the soft power of this country for a really long time. The industry is seeing a drastic change, of course, thanks to internet, thanks to a lot of writers, thanks to people, thanks to the economic freedom which is now perhaps making it possible. Back in the day, when our parents or grandparents, they did not have perhaps the monies to ensure that their kids would go or pursue something which could be creative, nor were there economic opportunities for a lot of creative people to make a sustainable living and yet creatively pursue the field of arts. So a lot is happening in India, and I think as more and more people get into this industry, it's also a reflection of the rising India. Congratulations for writing this wonderful book. I will finish it soon, and what I've enjoyed about it so far is the insights that I get about the industry, because if you read between lines, and that is essentially what fiction books want us to do, read between the lines and see the story and see the stories behind those stories. I'm enjoying it, and I'm sure many people who pick this book will do so. Congratulations for writing it.
Thank you.
This is your debut novel, and I hope to see this take the shape and form of a movie and a commercial success soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I will really look forward to hearing your comments once you've read the book entirely, and then we can have a conversation about why there was no married actor in this.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.